If John was beaten up and attacked in that house, who did it?
Just to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know.
Okay, you're aware he was beaten up by Brian Colin Albert. I mean, we're all in on the same joke, right? My tail light was cracked and John was pulverized.
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And it's not for us to know. Somebody other than Karen is responsible for that, for the killing of John.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm not sure what my picture is coming out small on the screen. Help me out with the mic, too. Make sure the mic is working, because for a little bit earlier, it was when I first logged on, it was a little bit buggy. But good morning, everybody. Why am I only in this small picture here? Let's see. All right, here we go. How are you guys doing this morning? Can you guys hear me good? I got up nice and early this morning. I was up at 6:30, so I'm ready to go. Good morning, Thomas, Michelle, Baby D, and Thomas says Mike is fine. Thank you, Thomas. And just make sure I didn't miss anybody else. Dawn Marie, good morning. Emily, good morning. And did I hear? Oh, Deborah Doodles, good morning. All right, guys. So today we get closing arguments. Someone told me there might be some slides presented today by the prosecution. I didn't see that, so I'm not sure anything about that. Thank you, Don. So, my conclusion on this case, my prediction on this case and how it's going to go. People here probably aren't going to be happy with this, but it hasn't changed. I believe it'll be an acquittal. And not because of any problem with the prosecution's case, not because of any lack of credibility with the main witness, Officer Noonan. Just there was nothing that came up in terms of independent evidence to determine whose story was the truth. Now, the one thing that maybe gives me pause on that is this, and let me know if you guys agree, and I can see the chat. So, yeah, my eyes are pretty good this morning. I can actually see the chat without the glasses. Huh. I wonder why my eyes are better. Anyways, so the one thing that gave me pause yesterday in Fitzsimmons' testimony was the fact that she described Officer Noonan as leaving the room and going down the stairs, and that's the moment that she leapt for the gun. Now, I don't believe that at all. Officer Noonan did not testify to that. Nobody has testified to that. And I don't think that anybody would leave her alone for a second. Officer Noonan is a highly experienced officer. He's not perfect. He's going to make mistakes. And he made mistakes here, no question. Certainly, if nothing else, he missed a shot. He took 2 shots at her at close range, and one of them completely missed. So he's not perfect. But one thing he would not do. Good morning, Nurse 60. Just seeing if anybody else has heard different or agrees with what I'm saying here. To me, I don't believe her story that he went down those stairs and that's when she pulled the weapon. That's the biggest problem with her credibility for me. Now, there's a reason that she has to tell that story that way. And it's this. If she wants to tell people that she reached for a gun to kill herself with an officer standing just feet in front of her, that's a problem for her, right? Because she almost has to, that almost paints a picture of a suicide by cop scenario. Because why would you reach for a gun if there's an officer standing, just an armed officer standing just in front of you? You wouldn't. If she was to do that, it's either she's intending to shoot him or she's attempting suicide by cop. But to attempt suicide by cop, you almost have to point the gun at him, don't you? You have to make him feel endangered. So let me just look and see. I'll go with the glasses now. Let me just look in chat and see what you guys think of that theory. Nurses 60 says she's been following, or he has been following since the beginning of the Karen Reed case. So good to have you back, Nurse 60, and thank you for commenting. We like to, I know for a lot of people, it's they're a little shy about posting in here, but don't worry, you're safe. So please say hello when you're here if you can. Thank you. Michelle agrees with me. Michelle also says, I think she's guilty, but don't think she'll be convicted. I agree with that. Okay, we're about to get the courtroom feed to go live, so let me bring that in for you, and I'll turn down the volume.
Owners can lease the GB80 for $399 per month, exclusive Genesis retail.
Okay. Okay, so this actually is the court feed. We're taking this off of channel NBC 10, their YouTube channel in Boston. That's where we've been taking the feed from. So it's now 8:45. I wanted to get started early too because I believe they may start on time today. Today we'll go right to the close, if they go right to the closing statements anyways, unless there's more court business that has to be dealt with. So just wanted to make sure you guys know we'll be ready. All right, so let me go back to the comments and see what you guys think, if you agree with that. Does this cause a problem for Kelsey, her story about, because if she's lying about that, then you almost have to convict her. That might give the judge the ground that he needs to convict her. Nurse 60 says she doesn't believe that Noonan, of all people, ever took his eyes off her. Agreed. 100% agreed. Michelle says that Noonan was credible. I found him to be credible too. And so when I say that I believe that there'll be a not guilty vote, that has nothing to do with the fact that that has nothing to do with the credibility of Officer Noonan. It's just at the end of the day, it's still a he said, she said. And other than her story about him going downstairs, she came across as reasonably intelligent and not insane. Her testimony was reasonably good yesterday. But that one thing, and I think she's added that to the story, and that really is probably what gives away the fiction of it. Liz says, no, when she drew that weapon, he had every right to shoot. Okay, we're not talking about whether he had a right to shoot. Officer Noonan is not on trial here. This is, I know I kept saying this to you yesterday, Liz. This really has nothing to do with that. Yes, of course he had a right to shoot. It's self-defense as soon as she pulled that weapon. That's not being debated here. What's being debated is simply one thing. Did she take that gun and point it at Officer Noonan? That's the only question that matters here. That's the only question. Nothing else matters. And you have to really, this is why they wanted a non-jury trial, because they want the judge to really parse out and isolate what needs to be focused on. So, for example, Kelsey's mental health history going into this is not a factor. It's not allowed to be debated. Neither is even what went into the affidavit of the warrant to take her child and her dog. There had to be some basis for that. Did she threaten violence? But none of that is allowed to be considered here. The only thing that is to be considered here is whether or not she pointed her gun. And there was no one else in the room but Officer Noonan. So it becomes a he said, she said. And then, so it's not just about his credibility, it's about her credibility. And his credibility doesn't have, it's not enough that his credibility is very, very good. His credibility has to be pretty much impeccable here. If there's any chance at all that he's not telling the truth, then you have to acquit. If there's any chance at all, even if it's just 1%, you have to acquit. Now, is there a chance? Well, he did have incentive. If he shot her and it was not self-defense, then he could be charged with a crime, at the very least, and he would lose his career. Deborah Doodle says she pointed her gun at him because she was so angry. But do we know that? Did anybody testify to her being angry? For instance, did any of the other cops testify to her being angry? And the answer is no. Baby says the fiance seems unstable, and what's up with all the guns she and Justin had in the house? Kind of crazy. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think those things are appropriate that'll come up in terms of the board or whatever that will consider, the judge that will consider down the road whether or not she gets to have the baby back, whether or not she gets custody of the baby. But for now, those things are not under consideration. Okay, I do have the volume up on the court, and you can see they're kind of just getting ready there. So it'll probably look like this for at least the next 10 minutes. All right. Young Cato says both were credible. I think she's guilty, but don't think it's beyond a reasonable doubt unless the bullet was chambered. And we can't, apparently there's no evidence that the bullet was chambered, and there's probably just no way to know. I guess, no, she did pull the trigger, and she has admitted that. No shots were fired through that gun. So was a bullet in the chamber when the police got that gun? Did she finally succeed? Jen Network. Are you a network, Jen? Do you have another channel or something? Feel free to tell us about it, and we'll promote you a little bit. Noonan was credible, she says, but so was Kelsey. I think she'll be found not guilty. Massachusetts needs to change how they handle situations like this. So I'm in agreement with that, although I'm not sure what you mean about how they handle situations like that. So feel free to tell us more. Good morning, Wiley Doodle. Victoria is watching from the gym in Dublin, Ireland. Wild Roses, good to see you. It's been a while. I think I have since we've seen you. And Wild Roses says it's a fact that she wielded a loaded gun with officers present, regardless of where it was pointed, and she lied about the location of her gun stash. But again, the only thing we're deciding here, the only thing the judge will be deciding, is whether or not she's guilty of assault with a dangerous weapon. So did she point that gun at Officer Noonan? That's the only thing that'll be decided here. Wild Rose has said she should at least get probation and be prohibited from possessing any guns. I mean, I do agree with that in an ideal world, but it's going to be determined by laws, not by common sense. The laws are designed to try to empower common sense as much as possible, but no system of laws can perfectly do that. And that's what will be determined here. So if she's acquitted, she will probably have the right to keep her guns unless there's some other hearing on some body that makes decisions on guns. It is kind of a scary thought. I agree. The idea of this woman having guns, very scary. Young Cato says Noonan would be acquitted if he were on trial, but the question is whether she pointed the gun at him. I agree 100%. Young Cato. Young Cato must be a very good arguer if he's named after Cato. Unless it's Cato Caitlin. Cato Caitlin? Is it Caitlin? Mandy says the question is, did she commit assault? Exactly. Weird how Justin's pot use was allowed in, but not her history of violence. Yeah, I agree. I don't know why that was really allowed to be snuck in here because it had no relevance at all as to why she was potentially trying to kill herself or kill Officer Noonan. Good morning, Chick for the Bricks. She lied about the guns, no credibility. Well, she didn't lie on the stand. She lied to the police officers. So that's a little bit different. She wasn't under oath. She lied to the police officers because she, from their point of view, still wanted access to the gun so she could kill herself. Her credibility's OPI is in the house. Good to see you. And OPI, I don't know if you're a guy or gal, but you've been with us for the whole trial. Thank you. Her credibility is in the toilet. She lied more times than I can count on the stand. Well, how many of those lies were provable? That would be my question. And I'll try to catch up on the chat here and see what you say. So I do believe that she was lying about the stairs, and that's a key lie. To me, that might be the only important lie. But that's still a he said, she said. Because no one else really knows whether or not Officer Noonan went down those stairs. I think it's a lie just because it seems very unlikely that he would do that. Mandy said, on 13, Mandy says, Officer Noonan is highly trained and experienced. He would not have shot her if she wasn't pointing the gun at him. We really can't know that because even highly experienced cops, many of them go their whole careers without ever being in a situation like that. Wiley Doodle says she should never be a cop. She should have supervised visitation with her child, but she lied and put others in harm's way. She should be held accountable for her actions. So it'll be about what's best for the child. And there are a lot of reasons to be concerned as to whether or not a child living with her is the best and safest situations. All right, we already got camera action going, so maybe we'll get going right at 9 o'clock. I do think that we will. There's a good chance that we will. Wiley Doodle. Yeah, I already read that. Michelle said she did pull a gun, and that has caused the shoot. But again, that's not the question here. Whether Officer Noonan's not on trial. Chick from the Brick says, I am just so disgusted with the culture of police are bad and culprits are innocent. So gross. Yeah. The online mob, or certainly the FKR mob, has become kind of crazy. And there's an issue too, even just with people that are outside FKR in the public. But I think it's overall is healthy, but they have to start learning to think about these things, to understand that in no situation are the police going to do everything perfectly. They're human beings. I would think that if the police could do this over again, there would have been 2 cops in her presence at all time. I mean, they're going into a situation where we don't know what's in the warrant that justified that warrant, but they know. They got to read the affidavit. So whatever there must be some history of potential violence here, threats of violence, something. Those officers knew about it. They knew she was unstable, and they knew that she had guns. And she gave somewhat flimsy explanations as to where those guns were. So the police really didn't know where the guns were, and yet they left her in the room with only Officer Noonan. And even if he didn't leave the room, still, she's alone in the room with 1 cop, and she managed. And let's face it, even if Officer Noonan never left that room, he allowed her to get access to guns. He allowed her to leap over and grab guns. And so we're talking about how experienced Officer Noonan is. He fucked that up. He screwed that up. He did not do a good job. I would expect a police officer to control that situation better. Not only did she pull a gun on him, but she was able to grab that gun and, based on his testimony, aim it at him and pull the trigger. And even after that, he was still not in a position to physically grab her and seize the gun. a 98-pound woman. So Officer Noonan did not do a very good job here. I think it's fair to say that. Now, again, we're all human beings. He's an older guy. You know, I'm not trying to be overly critical, but he didn't do a great job here. I think I didn't get to see all the comments. They've got too far ahead, so I had to go to the end. Chick from the Bricks, do you think the cops were giving her leniency because they knew her? Absolutely. She's a fellow cop, and that's just natural. It's not about whether he was obligated to grab her. By not being in a position to grab her, he could have been killed. Even so, if his story is correct, because he allowed her to grab the gun and he was not in a position to grab her, he could have died. That's a screw up. So again, it's not about whether it's not at all about whether he was justified to shoot. I don't think anybody here, Liz, if you're able to see chat, nobody here is saying that the shooting was unjustified. Nobody. I haven't said it. Nobody here is saying it. So you're kind of focused in on that, but nobody's saying that. The shooting was justified. Wild Rose just pointed out that she wanted to die by refusing the oxygen mask, but then alerts the medic that it stopped giving her oxygen. I did notice that as soon as she said that in her testimony, and that thought came into my head, and then obviously they knew that would happen, that people would be thinking that. I don't necessarily have a problem with that because someone that's suicidal probably goes through a lot of back and forth in their head. And it's like somebody that jumps off a bridge to die. I would imagine that as you're going under the water, you have a panic reaction and you try to fight to get to the surface. That would make sense to me. I mean, I've never done it, but. Rockbird points out that they had no search warrant, so they had to take her word for it. I don't know. Is that true, guys? What do you guys think about that? I mean, it seems like an interesting point. Did they have if they have a warrant to seize the guns? To me, it seems that they would have a warrant. That includes the ability to search the house. Am I wrong on that? You guys can tell me. Tom, you here? Do you have any opinion on that? Mandy says she lied about why she parked away from the house. Well, did she? She said, I parked away from the house because I didn't want anyone to know I was home. That would include the police. Desley Joy. Wow, that is a great name. That is a really great original name. I gotta use that name in one of my books. Good morning, everyone. Let's see if I can click on this. Good morning, everyone. Hope you are feeling well, and thank you for being here, Kevin. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. And Jules is in the house. Oh, she now calls herself Jules the One and Only. I forgot. She used to be called Jules is in the house. She says it's fair to say that they should have kept her seated and asked her where the baby's things were and grabbed the stuff themselves. They gave her cop courtesy. I agree with that 100%, Jules. And because I guess she was a cop, they were a little bit lackadaisical here, but that's shame on them. They still knew she was unstable, possibly dangerous. In fact, Officer Noonan said she was a whack job. So I mean, I'm not a cop, but I feel pretty confident that just common sense wise, if somebody had deputized me and told me to go in and do that job, and even if I was stuck alone in the room with her, I would have been 2 feet away. I would have been in a position where if she made any sudden move, I could grab her. I'm sure of that. I know myself. I've been in a lot of situations. I'm not a police officer. I haven't been in that. But I know I keep my head about me, and I know I would be always trying to think a couple of steps ahead of what the worst thing that could happen would be. Young Cato said, remember that she wasn't acting nuts. She handed over the kid and was generally being cooperative, and they knew her personally. It's in that context that she was able to grab the gun. That's a good point. I still, if you're a cop, you have to have that awareness about you. And most cops that I know do have that. In fact, they have that kind of cop look about them that they can never turn off once you're an experienced cop. If you spend time with a police officer, they're always paying attention. And that's from being in situations like that. And so if somebody does something suddenly, they don't get taken by surprise. So I am surprised that Officer Noonan got taken by surprise there. Donald says, I don't think she was suicidal. I mean, how can we know? Because wasn't she, even if she was going to shoot Officer Noonan, wasn't she committing suicide by cop in that moment? Or did she plan on shooting Officer Noonan and then making a dramatic escape to shoot her fiance? Pat points out that a grand jury didn't see enough to indict her on the intent to murder charge. Is there a difference at that point when charging with the assault charge? Unfortunately, Pat, you know I don't. Pat, you ask me a question, you know I'm not smart enough to know the answer. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the answer to that one. So the Duke Mateo, welcome, Duke. Again, the judge needs to send a message that the mass legal system hasn't been overtaken by online grifters and quacks like that witness. While I agree with that to a point, I do agree with that. But the judge has her life in his hands, and he's going to focus strictly on whether or not it was proved beyond a reasonable doubt that she assaulted this officer. Jules says Kelsey took advantage of the fact that these were her colleagues and they failed in treating her like one. At that moment, she was just a civilian being served. They should have taken guns first. They should have taken the guns, or at the very least, there should have been 2 officers in the room with her, and one of them should have been so close to her that if she made any sudden movements, they could grab her. Jolie, thank you. She says, by the way, it's been a pleasure listening and watching this trial with everyone here. Thanks for sharing all of your thoughts, even if they might not be the same as mine. Nice comment, Jolie. And yes, that's true. And, I've only been on generally in the morning before this trial, maybe once in a while during a break. So this is mostly about the community and chat. Baby says the cops should have had social services and made sure Justin wasn't anywhere near the house. That does seem like common sense, but is there policy? Is there practice of doing that in these situations? We didn't really hear any testimony on that. Donald said that Mandy's not credible. You mean Kelsey? I mean, I believe Noonan too, but is it beyond a reasonable doubt? So I think the answer to that is no, and that has nothing to do with Noonan's credibility. It's just that would apply to any police officer in that situation. It's his word against theirs. Okay, it looks like we're about to get started. Unless that was just a mic check on their end. Celtics last night, I don't know if there's any sports fans here, played OKC, the best team in the league, the defending champions, a team that's been on fire, that has won 12 out of their last 13 games, a team that beat the Celtics a couple of weeks ago in a close game. And the Celtics got a very impressive 10-point win last night. Both teams were playing hard. Both teams were reasonably healthy, had all their players available. And it was an outstanding game. And it was probably hopefully an indication of what we'll see in the playoffs. Tatum played very well, but Brown was the key player in the fourth quarter, and he's evolving into that role. So they keep getting better and better. Sometimes the team frustrates me, especially with all the complaining to the officials about every call. But last night was overall just a great game to watch. And today also is opening day for the Red Sox. So it's supposed to be mid-50s here, pretty good. So spring is in the air. If the judge finds her not guilty, asked Mandy, can she then sue the police department? Well, I think you can sue the police department whether she's guilty or not. But obviously it's a lot harder to win if she's found guilty. Yeah, that neighbor I don't think it'll impact the case at all. But it was disturbing because she had that FKR look about her, right? She had that zombie look as soon as she got up on the stand. And I believe she 100% made up that testimony. And this is what we're dealing with here. When you're talking about a cult doesn't always have to have a leader. So you can have a cult here that's not a Turtle Boy cult. It's not a Mike Crawford cult. It's not a Karen Reed cult. It's a cult that kind of worships itself in the sense that they want to impress the others in the group. So this woman testified because she wants to be a hero to the other lunatics in that group. Wouldn't it be great if the judge actually calls out the defense for bringing in such a biased witness? They're not going to do that because that would jeopardize, that would open it up to appeal. And if that, had there been enough evidence against that witness, they would have disallowed her in the first place. So that's not going to happen. Okay, the judge has arrived.
All persons have anything to do before the Honorable
And that means that
Justice of the Superior Court. Now sitting in Lawrence, then for the County of Essex. Draw near, give your attendance, and you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and this Honorable Court. Court is now open. Please be seated.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
March 26, 2026, Court in 2, Lawrence Superior Court. Calling the criminal matter of Commonwealth versus Kelsey Fitzsimmons, 2025, 77 CR 311. Scheduled today for continued jury waive trial. Could counsel please identify themselves?
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. Martha Cooley for the defendant, Kelsey Fitzsimmons.
Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Fitzsimmons.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Your Honor. Timothy Bradle. With me is Ms. Healy, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Leonard.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks. You can have a seat. All right, so you folks ready to proceed?
Yes.
All right. I don't say this for the attorneys who know this, but because the government, the prosecution has the burden, they go last. The defense goes first in their closing. And Mr. Bradle, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. May it please the court. Counsel, ladies and gentlemen. Your Honor, June 30th, 2025 was the worst day in Kelsey Fitzsimmons' life. Her whole world imploded. Her fiance betrayed her. Her baby was being taken away. She was going to lose her house, her job. It was an incredible confluence of tragedy that was visited upon her that day. That day was about her, and she decided in the midst of what you saw testified to here, she decided to end her life. Patrick Noonan, when he came back up those stairs, Your Honor, walked into a suicide in progress. That gun was nowhere near him. That gun was already pointed at Miss Fitzsimmons' temple by Miss Fitzsimmons. She was a couple steps into the room. Officer Noonan, a gung-ho cop, highly trained, a SWAT guy. He'd already been ginned up all afternoon by the insane, ludicrous statements of Justin Elaine. He had that in his head. He walked in, and like all of us are susceptible to, he made a mistake. He shot too quick. He reacted too quickly. And instantly, he realized that he had to adjust the narrative. And that was easy, to just add 6 words to the equation, Your Honor. He said, words to the effect, "She pointed the gun at me." 6 words. What did those words do at that time period? Those words made him the victim. Those words made him the hero. And those words, most important, made him untouchable. Those words were a defense for his future, his life, his reputation, and they were conveyed to a very willing audience. His colleagues, his brothers, his family, the investigators on the case. So that's really what happened here, Your Honor, and it is a tragedy, and it is something that should not result in any further harm to Ms. Fitzsimmons. This should be over. This should be an acquittal, Your Honor. I want to talk to you about a few of the elements that I know you're going to be concerned about. So first thing I want to talk about, Judge, is the lack of motive and the lack of intent. Because when it gets down to brass tacks, I know that you're going to look at the law, you're going to look at the credibility determinations, and you're going to make your judgment. And here, this case fails the Commonwealth ship founders on the rocks of lack of motive and lack of intent. Let's talk about motive. Everything in life is motive. And it's ironic that, us lawyers always say, oh, well, you don't need to prove motive. But you really kind of do. It's might not be an element of the crime, but motive is everything in this business, Your Honor. Let's look at the motive or lack of motive. Fitzsimmons and Noonan are colleagues. They have already bonded over shared tragedies, shared experiences. They were okay with each other. They were friends. Kelsey thought well of him, and she thought he thought well of her. She knows he has a family. She knows who his family is. She's not going to harm this guy. She knows, Your Honor, that he didn't do this to her. She knows that Justin Elaine did this to her. And she's probably most important, she's been in those shoes before, serving restraining orders. She knows she's just a messenger. She knows he's just a messenger. This was the worst moment of her life, and she wanted to end her life. And how did she want to do it? She wanted to do it alone. She didn't want to involve these officers because she knew this was a selfish act. She came in here, and ironically, the most credible evidence that came into this case, Your Honor, was from the one person that didn't have to testify. And she came in here and she chose to testify. And she waived her rights and she testified. And she showed, Your Honor, that she's a moral person. She's a caring person. You will sit down and you'll deliberate, and you'll be drawing the inevitable conclusion that Kelsey Fitzsimmons is a moral person. You have to contrast that with the callous treatment of this case from the other side. Hey, we're going to go serve an order on Kelsey Fitzsimmons. Her ex-fiance got an order on her, on Kelsey. Let's go serve an order. The answer, sounds good. Let's go. Talks to his neighbor. Oh yeah, I'm the shooter. I'm the shooter. She's a whack job. So you have to take these credibility determinations into account. And I know you're a gentleman, but you have to get down to brass tacks on who's who here, Your Honor. What else shows you that she's a moral person? She doesn't want to involve these guys. She's trying to get rid of them. She says, oh, the guns are over here, so she can go where they really are. She keeps trying to give Houston and Noonan baby things to bring downstairs. She's trying to get rid of them. She's trying to get them away from her. She wants to do this on her own. She doesn't want to have some sort of a situation where she gets shot by one of her colleagues and friends. It's understandable because she's a moral person. She waits for her chance. She gets to her room. There's a distraction downstairs. She doesn't know what's going on because she's focused on the job she's trying to do here, the tragic, awful thing that she's trying to do to herself. That's how you know she's telling the truth, Your Honor. You saw in the room, and I'll show it to you in a minute, the chest that she got the gun from. It's a chest on the floor. It has one of those pretty substantial lids that you would have to flip up to get the gun, locate the gun, pick the gun out of the 4 guns, and stand up. If Noonan was standing right there in the door frame, that would have never happened. All those events, that little series of events, he would have been able to stop it. He would have stopped it. It tells you that he's down the steps. He was interested in the distraction downstairs. He saw Kelsey folding some baby clothes, getting baby things ready. His attention, it's human nature. His attention was drawn to go back down the stairs. He walked down the stairs 2 or 3 steps, 4 steps, whatever. And Kelsey told you straight up, that was my chance. And she took it. And she went in the chest. Exhibit 51, Your Honor, I'll show you right now. She went in that chest, flipped up that lid, got the gun, stood up. She told you, again, she's a moral person. She tried to keep the gun concealed. She made the motion like this, Your Honor, where she put the gun like this, and she kind of walked over here because she didn't want the police to see her with a gun. She held the gun to her stomach area. She walked to a clear area, and she put the gun to her head. And that's what I mean when I say Officer Noonan came back up the stairs, and what did he walk into? He didn't walk into some Rambo woman trying to shoot him in the face. He walked into Kelsey, who you now know a little bit from her testimony. He walked into Kelsey's room, and Kelsey had a gun to her head, and he walked into a suicide in progress, Your Honor. And the man that had just been holding her baby, that she chose to hold her baby, that she chose to feed her baby, walked into her suicide in progress. The gun was nowhere near Noonan. There was no threat to Noonan. And the law says that an officer may not use deadly force on someone who is exhibiting a danger only to themselves. And that's offered to Your Honor twofold, in the sense that it shows that that this was not a reasonable use of force, and it shows you that his knowledge of that statute, as he said on the stand, gives him a motive to lie. He knows that this is not a good shooting. He knows this is not a clean shooting, and that gives him a motive here, Your Honor. And like all of us, we all make mistakes. He overreacted and he shot. He had the look on his face, panic, flustered, he shot. He had made a mistake by leaving her there, walked down the steps, a few steps, and that gave her the chance. And when he did this, he knew immediately, Your Honor, that he had to adjust the narrative. Filtered through the legal lens, Your Honor, that tells us that Kelsey had no intent. She had no intent to harm Noonan. There's no assault here because she didn't have the intent to do so. As the fact finder, you can consider everything I said about motive, that she lacked any motive to harm this gentleman. In fact, it was the opposite. She thought well of him. She knew Justin did this to her. She had just trusted him with her baby, and she had tried several times to get these officers away from the situation. No intent to harm him, no motive driving her mindset to do so. Reasonable doubt, burden of proof, Your Honor. Where the evidence supports a reasonable and more plausible alternative, and that's shown here by Kelsey's testimony, it cannot be said that the Commonwealth has proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt. There is reasonable doubt. When there are two plausible versions of what happened, that itself is reasonable doubt. The versions themselves, Your Honor, show reasonable doubt. Kelsey's version rings true. Noonan's version is all over the place. Noonan's version is contradicted by the strong consensus of everybody else in the house. Noonan portrays a couple different stories, but if you want to pick one where it's this drawn out potential gun battle, where she's backpedaling, sidestepping, tapping, racking, there's commands going on, that takes time. It takes time for me even to say it. Never mind do it. And that's belied by everything everybody else in the house says. Everyone else says, Kelsey, no, 2 shots in quick succession, bam, bam. That does not fit with what Noonan said happened. So on that alone, Your Honor, as a fact finder, I suggest that your duty is accomplished quickly, because there are two extremely divergent versions of this event. And Noonan's version has changed itself. Noonan's version is inconsistent with who you now know Kelsey is as a person. It's self-serving. And like I said, it makes him untouchable. And when you judge it against everyone in the house, he's the only one with the Rambo story. Everyone else has what Kelsey says. He walks into a suicide in progress. He sees it. He reacts. Kelsey, no. Bam, bam. Brain freeze. Mistake. Has to cover it up immediately. What else do we have? When you're a fact finder, Your Honor, you want to look for corroboration. What's the corroboration on either side of this thing? Or lack of corroboration, which is what really it is here. The big one, the big elephant in the room, is that this department has no body cameras. We wouldn't even be here if they had body cameras. There's no evidence other than people's words. He said versus she said. That's oftentimes, almost all the time, not a good place to start for the Commonwealth. How many of these guys didn't do reports? What's up with that? Why didn't Trooper Strong put the body camera video on the witness he's interviewing? There's no science. The testimony of everyone else in the house shatters his narrative. Kelsey Fitzsimmons has been blessed. She should be dead 2 times over by her own hand and by the hand of Officer Noonan, who shot too quick. She's blessed. She's here today, and she has a new lease on life. And maybe that's why the investigation is what it is. And maybe that's why Noonan's story is so sloppy, because nobody expected her to be here today to tell her truth. But she is, Your Honor. And as the fact finder, I want to respectfully ask you to consider the evidence, consider the lack of motive, the lack of intent, the inconsistencies. The credibility contest is firmly in her camp. She came in here and she told you what happened. Unvarnished truth. And I ask you to find her not guilty. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
every piece of credible evidence in this case proves one thing, that she's guilty. All the testimony, the scientific evidence, the physical evidence, the demonstrative evidence, everything points to one conclusion: she is guilty. Even her own testimony proves she's guilty, because it's impossible to have happened the way she said it. It is scientifically, mechanically impossible for it to happen the way she said it. Her story is that she grabbed a gun, put it to her head, pulled the trigger, and it clicked. The chamber was empty. That's what her story is. And that's what Officer Noonan's story is, too. She pulled the trigger, click, nothing came out. There wasn't a round in the chamber. She even said, she told everybody how stupid I am. I tried to kill myself with an empty gun. But what do we know about the gun? What do we know about her gun? Because after she went to the floor, Lieutenant David picked it up, put it on the bed. Officer Noonan picked it up and put it on the table. And then Officer Kaur came in the room. And what happened then? Officer Noonan said, secure that gun, make it safe. And so what did he do? He took the gun, he found that black box, the safe. He made sure that was empty. He turned it over. He pulled out the magazine. that you can see right here. He opened the chamber, and there was a round in the chamber. He dumped it out into this safe and put the firearm in there. And then they stood watch on that until State Trooper Bonasara took it back in the lab. That magazine that you have in evidence contains 16 rounds. It was a 17-round capacity gun. It contains 16 rounds, plus the one that was in the chamber. 17 rounds. As we know, there are only two ways to get a bullet into the chamber. One is if there's already a bullet in the chamber, someone pulls the trigger, a bullet comes out, the casing comes out, the chamber's open, the spring allows another bullet to come up. That's one way, and we know that didn't happen here. The gun didn't fire because the chamber was empty. The only way a bullet gets in this chamber, other than that way, is if someone racks the gun. She said she didn't rack the gun, but there was a bullet in the chamber. She did rack the gun. What did Officer Noonan say? She pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. She stepped back, tap racked, tried again, didn't do it. Tap racked again, pulled it, and that's when he fired. She put a round in that chamber. That's the only way it got there. Her story can't be true. She got up on that stand and she lied to you. It's scientifically and physically impossible for her story to have happened the way she said. That's what the evidence shows. But she didn't just lie to you then. She lied again. She lied at the scene about where the guns were. And she admitted that, and I understand that, right? And she said she lied to the police because she decided to kill herself. But when did she say she said that? They had been to the house. They had talked to her, according to her. She now started contemplating all of the ramifications of what's going to happen to her. Because she's losing her life, her job, her son is being taken away, all of these things. And so she's going that over her head. And then minutes later, as she's walking through the house, she says, my gun's in the basement. Because that's the time she made the decision to kill herself. Later on. And we know that's a lie. We know that's a lie because what was one of the first things they asked her when they went to that house? They asked her to put the baby down because they were concerned for the baby, told her the restraining order, what the parameters were, and asked her where your guns are. When she was still sitting on the sofa. They weren't waiting to ask that question until she was already walking around the house. No way. And what did she say there? They're in the basement. And we know she said it there before she moved around the house, which is untrue, because her friend, Officer Houston, who was invited to her wedding, says it also. He says, Sergeant Daly asked. And then remember what he said? He said, I was in the living room, she was sitting down, and then I saw a gun case on the other sofa. And so I opened it up to see. And she said again, I already told you the guns are in the basement. Now, why at that point did she say that? We don't know. She didn't tell us because she lied to us about why she said it later, because we know she didn't say it later. So she lied again. You can't trust her. She also lied about knowing that her mom was in the house. She was upstairs. The officers, Noonan, I think it was, Noonan heard an older woman's voice down there and said, who is that? She says, I have no idea. She doesn't know her own mother's voice, her best friend that she just talked to come to the house. And she said she didn't know whose voice it was. Another lie. She said on the stand yesterday that she didn't know Justin was in the house. And we know that's a lie too, because what happened when the three of them were upstairs? It's Newman, it's Houston, and it's the defendant. She hears him downstairs. Houston hears him downstairs, and she says, keep him away from me. I don't want him in my house, or something to that effect. And that's when Houston went down to make sure he wasn't coming up and went to the basement. She knew he was in the house. She absolutely did, and she lied to you when she said she didn't yesterday. And you know what else she lied about? Something so simple, but it shows who she is. The restraining order. She said, the restraining order was taking my dog away. It says it. It doesn't say that. Nothing about the dog in there. I could go on about the lies, but I want to talk about the credible evidence. The credible evidence in this case. When Lieutenant Daly got a call, I actually got a visit from Justin Elaine when he was in the lobby of the PD. And Justin told him he got a 209A against Kelsey Fitzsimmons. And Detective Daly knew that she had been sectioned before, that she had guns, that they were taking the child away from her for a period of time. And so what did he do? He called Officer Houston. He asked Houston to call Daly to meet up. And why did he say he did that? He said because those two are cool, calm, and collected. They don't panic. They keep things calm. That's what he said. And that's why when he called Houston, he said, can you call Daly? We got to do this. And so he wants you to believe, defense counsel, that Pat Newman was cavalier about, oh, okay, sounds good, we have to serve a restraining order. But that's not what happened. He was mischaracterizing it, I hope you remember, in the grand jury minutes, because Houston had called Pat and said, hey, we got to serve an order, can you meet me by the school? And Pat said, sounds good. It wasn't until he got over there, it wasn't until Lieutenant Daly was there that they learned really what they were going to do. And they went over there. And defense counsel asked Daly, you guys were cavalier about it, you knew her, weren't worried about the guns, all this stuff. And Lieutenant Daly said, no. No. His quote was, we had an increased level of diligence. Everyone was more on point because they did know what they were walking into. They did know. They did know that she had been sectioned before. They did know there was going to be a baby in the house. They did know that she had guns. They did know at that point that she had parked her car far away. This is all going to what they were thinking at that point. They did know all those things. And they did know Justin's concerns. He said, according to Lieutenant Daly, I'm worried she's going to kill the baby, kill herself, and kill someone else. So that's what they were thinking when they went into this house. That's the credible evidence when they went in there. And what did they do when they went in there? They sat her down, and they allowed her, or maybe they asked her, I can't remember, to go around and get some stuff for the baby because she knew Justin was coming to get the baby. And they were in her pocket the whole time. They followed her around the house, at least two of them, while she did that. And you know that because even Officer Houston said, I was in her pocket. We went into the kitchen, and I noticed there were butcher blocks with knives on it, and they were concerned. There was no chance they were leaving her alone. No chance they were leaving her alone. Officer Newman. Officer Newman. All of the testimony that you've heard about Officer Newman, even from the defendant, he's a gentleman, he's experienced, he is by the book in his training and experience, starting in the military, through boot camp, through security forces school, security forces squadron, with all the training he had, and Humvees and helicopters, and the SWAT team, 2 times a month training, clearing rooms, clearing buildings, hostage situations, missing persons, no-shoot scenarios, twice a month, and a 40-hour block every year. For over a decade, he did that. And he moved to Lawrence, as far as the department goes, because it was busier, and he had more experience. He was cool, calm, and collected. There's no doubt about that. And to say when they're upstairs and he walks away and leaves her alone because he heard a commotion that Officer Houston was going to attend to is a joke. It really is. Now, how do you know they were going by the boat at that point? And how do you know they were vigilant? Because they followed around everywhere. Because both Houston and Officer Noonan said she kept handing us things, and we kept putting them down. We wanted our hands free. Because they were ready for whatever happened. Hoping nothing did, but ready for whatever happened. So at some point, Houston and Noonan are upstairs, and the defendant goes into her room. And she hears Justin. And Houston goes down to keep the peace to make sure he's there. And Officer Noonan is watching her. He's watching her. And she's on one knee. And she lunges, and she disappears. And she emerges with this, pointing at him like she is trained to do. Click at his face. And what does he see next? He draws his weapon, and he says, his testimony, it kind of slowed down. The whole thing took maybe 4 seconds, maybe even 3.5 seconds. His training has kicked in. His experience has kicked in. It was a surprise to him, certainly, because she got the drop on him. And why did she do this? Who knows? Maybe he's right. Maybe she was going through him to get to justice. Maybe she was just so upset she was going to shoot anybody in front of her. Maybe she wanted him to shoot her. We don't know because she lied about it. We don't know. But the fact is, she started to shake, she started to tremble, and she lunged for the gun that he couldn't see. And what happened after she flipped? She stepped back, and now he knows, based on his training experience and the clip, there is not a round in the chamber. He knows that, and so he doesn't shoot. According to the defendant's testimony, he had every right to shoot at that point. And you know what? He actually did. He had a right to shoot her at that point. If you point a gun at a cop and pull the trigger, they get to shoot. But he didn't. Because he was controlled and disciplined. That's the way his career went. And so she steps back, tap back, and tries to do it. He doesn't shoot her then. And what's he doing at this point? Kelsey, no. Kelsey, no. Because he knows the threat isn't there, really, because there still wasn't one in the chamber. Kelsey, no. Kelsey, no. He is being disciplined like we wish every police officer, every law enforcement agent in this country was. He should be applauded for his actions on that day. Tap rack again. Now he knows one's in the chamber. Threat's on. She starts to raise it, and he shoots. He shoots twice to stop the threat. He stopped shooting when the threat was neutralized. Defense counsel during his cross-examination, well, you would have unloaded her gun. He goes, no, that's not what you do. You shoot until the threat is neutralized. She was now down on the ground. But his training and experience are still taking over at this point, because what does he do? He still has his gun on her because the gun's still there. He can't see it. Lieutenant Daly comes in, Lieutenant Houston comes up, and what does Officer Houston say that he sees when he comes upstairs? That Officer Noonan is standing there with the gun low and ready. His training is still taking place. He's still doing what he was trained to do. The gun is put on the bed. He's calm and collected. He takes the gun and moves it away so people are safe. He's deliberate in those actions. When it's away from her, he starts to tend to her. Officer Core comes in and he asks Officer Core to make the gun safe. He's cool, calm, and collected. That's what Lieutenant Daly expected, and that's what he was. He didn't make a mistake. That's what the credible evidence shows. And what did he say to Officer Houston after? And this just goes to state of mind, I know. That she pointed the gun at me, and it clicked. And she tried to rack him up. Immediately after, this wasn't him saving his hide or protecting himself. Seconds after this happened, that's what he said. Every piece of credible evidence points to the unmistakable fact that she is guilty. Every piece of physical evidence, scientific evidence, mechanical evidence, every piece of testimony from Daly to Houston to Core, even Lauren Page, the mother, even the defendant corroborates what Officer Newman says. Every piece. Your Honor, I would suggest to you there is only one fair and just verdict in this case, and that is guilty. Thank you.
Moving for a sidebar.
I'd like to speak to counsel anyway at sidebar for scheduling purposes.
Okay, guys, what'd you think? Did that move the needle for you guys in one direction or the other? For me, I think maybe it slightly moved the needle in the direction of the prosecution, in that they did a good job. One of the things I had been thinking about this yesterday during the trial, but I forgot it this morning until the prosecution just mentioned it here. But she definitely was inconsistent on her testimony about about knowing that her fiance was in the house that day. She definitely has lied about that. Strangely too, because it was in her own testimony that she told inconsistent. It was clear. I mean, she went on and on about, she kept mixing up the words about whether or not between plaintiff and victim and so on and so forth here. But she was trying to say yesterday that she didn't realize that her boyfriend was in the house. But clearly she did, because based on her own testimony. So that's a pretty big lie, because it does go towards a possible motive for her shooting Officer Noonan, as the prosecution just pointed out here. She shot Noonan because she wanted to become a villain and get away and run down the stairs and shoot her boyfriend. That's a possibility here. So those lies are pretty significant. Are they enough to result in a conviction? I don't know. I still lean towards there's just enough reasonable doubt here. If you have any sliver at all of doubt, and this is still primarily just a he said, she said, that you're going to end up with an acquittal. But that wasn't, but that moved the needle for me a little bit today, a little bit closer towards the possibility of a conviction. And even the fact that she lied about the dog, that emerged today. So, I've talked about it with several people last night. Like, why was the dog on the warrant to be seized? But it turns out it wasn't. That she just either is confused about that or made it up or whatever. I know, why would she make something like that up? Well, she is a whack job. You can see that she is a whack job. And obviously at some point more will come out about her history. She's been Section 8 before. So she has a pretty serious mental health issue. And the fact that they were taking away her child probably indicates that she has a history of making threats. But again, so anybody out there who's trying to turn this woman into their hero, you're a whack job too. All right. If you want to turn Kelsey Fitzsimmons, who at least somewhat likely aimed her weapon at Officer Noonan, then you're a whack job too. If you really think that this woman is factually innocent and is some kind of hero to you, you're a whack job. That said, like I said, I do think it's going to be difficult for the judge to go with a guilty here. It's terrible to think that this woman would have access to firearms again, and it's disturbing to think about whether or not she would be a threat to her child if she got custody, or even if she got visitation rights. So, unfortunately, she actually is a whack job. So, but like I said, that said, I think there's a pretty good chance she'll be acquitted. And if I had to predict something, I'd say she would. Sandy says that maybe her boyfriend being able to tell her mother about her behavior sent her off the edge. Maybe, if you already are a whack job, doesn't take much to send you off the edge. The evidence proves she drew her firearm in Noonan's presence. Liz, nobody's disputing that. Both sides admit that. Both witnesses say that. So I'm not sure why you're pointing that out. Just looking through the comments. Thank you guys for being here. JM agrees with me. I think for me, still the biggest issue is I don't believe that Officer Noonan would go down the stairs, so I believe she made that up. And once you're making that up, you could be making the whole thing up. I do wonder if it's time for Noonan to retire. I mean, one thing the prosecution emphasized there was just how much they were concerned, to the point where Officer Houston was even analyzing the knives in the kitchen. They were worried about the danger of this woman. And yet she was still allowed to be left in a position where she could grab a gun and fire it in a way that nobody could grab her. That's bad police work. And it's also bad. Apparently, Officer Houston went downstairs to try to quiet the disturbance that was going on down there between the mother and the boyfriend. Why was that allowed to happen? Why was the boyfriend allowed in the house? Why was the mother allowed in the house? They should not be allowed in the house until this woman's in handcuffs or has been removed from the house.
We went to sidebar for two reasons. One was Mr. Bradel has a series of objections that he'd like to lodge about the Commonwealth's closing, which I'm going to give you an opportunity to do in open court, with the Commonwealth in open court responding. And also I went over the schedule. So as I told counsel, my intention is to take as long of a period of time as I need to reach a verdict, provide the court staff and counsel with 30 minutes notice, and come out and announce my verdict, some of my reasoning here in public, and whatever time that works. In other words, if it's during our traditional lunch break, so be it. You folks will have a half-hour notice, which means that you'll be able to go and have coffee or lunch or whatever, as long as you can get back here. All right, so that's how we've worked that out. We also discussed at sidebar the fact that in a jury trial, we never provide the jurors with ammunition and a firearm, even with the trigger lock at the same time. So my intention is that Mr. Ruane, our assistant clerk, will keep possession of the ammunition, and the firearm will come back in chambers with me, along with the other exhibits. When and if I need the ammunition, will be switched out. All right. Okay. Globally, have I said in open court what we discussed?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Bradell, I'll hear you on the objections.
So, Judge, traditionally we do this at sidebar, but as you mentioned, we don't have a fact finder here that we need to talk off to the side to. So, in open court, I'm happy to do this. Sure. Yep. I'll go back over everything I said at sidebar, Your Honor. Judge, the first objections I have to counsel's closing argument center on ballistics issues. The first part is that counsel picked up the gun and used it 3 times. Prior to that, counsel provided what I would consider to be expert testimony on the operation of the gun. I think it exceeded the scope of what Detective Bonasaro talked about. He said that it had to be a scientific certainty that this gun was racked by Kelsey Fitzsimmons. Mischaracterizes the defense position that we're not saying necessarily that it did or didn't happen. We said that Kelsey Fitzsimmons didn't rack the firearm. And we have a completely different version of events. So no one's saying that it didn't happen. We're saying that Kelsey didn't do it. And to characterize it like, you know, that it had to be racked by Kelsey Fitzsimmons is not fair argument, and it mischaracterizes the state of the evidence. The second objection relative to ballistics, Your Honor, is that counsel was acting out. I believe it was the second time he picked up the firearm. Counsel was acting out on Noonan's story that Ms. Fitzsimmons had accessed the firearm from the chest and picked it up to point it at Noonan's face. And on Noonan's testimony, she just pulled the trigger and it clicked. Counsel's acting it out. Prior to pulling the trigger, counsel racked the firearm and then pulled the trigger. And that's not what happened on even Noonan's testimony.
I'm happy to allow you to make a record, but the fact that there's 2 different versions of what folks testified about is fair game. What the issue right now is whether the Commonwealth argued items that were not in evidence or attempted to draw inferences from items that were not in evidence. So the disagreement about the racking is just not before me.
Well, that's why I bring it up, though, Judge, because this racking issue has been brought up to the forefront, and he did something that is not part of the evidence. No one says that she racked the gun before the first shot, and that's what he did when he acted it out. So that's why it's a mischaracterization. I'll just rely on Your Honor's discretion.
That's not what Mr. Kubatosi did, though.
I did see him rack the firearm before he fired the second shot. He did it the second time, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm having trouble understanding. Again,
it's just that when you act out the testimony, you have to do it accurately, and he didn't.
I'm going to say this in open court, and it won't be the last time I say it. Whether or not Officer Noonan exercised reasonable use of deadly force is not before me. That is not my decision.
I agree with you, and I say it on credibility.
And hold on, and whether the North Andover Police Department followed procedure in executing, serving this restraining order is not before me. Child custody is not before me. All right, visitation is not before me. What's before me is, has the Commonwealth proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant pointed that firearm for any perceptible amount of time at Officer Nooney? Okay, so all of this is just not helpful.
And I offer on credibility, though, Your Honor.
Okay.
Also, the Commonwealth said that on the scene, Ms. Fitzsimmons didn't say part of her story there, so therefore she's making it up. And whenever the Commonwealth tries to argue that somebody, a defendant, didn't say something, that's very dangerous ground for the Commonwealth, Your Honor, that the defendant is under no burden whatsoever to say anything, Your Honor. And here to suggest that she's lying because she didn't say part of her story when she's shot in the chest at the scene is unfair argument, but it also violates her right to remain silent. And it's an intrusion on that, so I would object to that. I ask you not to consider that, Your Honor.
Except that, Mr. Bradle, she waived her right to remain silent, right? She testified. So
at the scene, though, Judge.
Isn't it fair game for the Commonwealth to discuss the testimony that your client offered?
The testimony, yes, but he's saying that at the scene, she didn't say XYZ when she didn't have to say XYZ at the scene. And that's, you know, the Commonwealth can only argue that when a defendant makes a comprehensive statement and leaves something out.
No idea why the feed cut out, so I'm going to have to try to find another feed that's still covering this. This is unusual. All right. Who else is covering this, guys? Anybody suggest? Oh, NBC 10 Boston is fixing it. I wonder if this is a problem that's so it's down everywhere. Okay. A law and crime is still going. Okay.
To my client,
okay.
She wanted to kill someone else, which didn't happen. That was not the statement. So that's a very important, very dangerous, very unfair, very prejudicial misrepresentation of what was attributed to Justin Elaine in the lobby. She never said anything about killing someone else. He didn't even he didn't say that she said that. So I ask you to strike that and not consider it. And the last thing, Judge, about lying about the dog on the restraining order, Your Honor, that trying to take her dog. And it is in the complaint to the restraining order by Justin Elaine.
I know he's trying to do a second closing, but the evidence is what the evidence is.
Yeah, but Judge, you can't say, when you have the discovery on the point, you can't say that something is a lie when you have the papers that show it's not a lie. And the box was checked in the complaint to get her dog. So that's a mischaracterization of the evidence that needs to be corrected, Your Honor. And that's my last point. Thank you.
So, Commonwealth, from my perspective, with all due respect to Mr. Bradle, who's done a terrific job advocating for his client, I view that as nothing more than a rebuttal to the Commonwealth's closing. So I'll give you a few minutes to rebut these things. Let me say this, though. I don't believe that there was any evidence before me that Miss Fitzsimmons was sectioned previously. I think that the way I view the evidence is that this is what the police believed. It was part of their state of mind in serving it. But I'm at a loss, frankly, that, in other words, what I'm saying, Mr. Bradle, is out of all the items that you argued about the Commonwealth purportedly arguing something not in evidence, yes, this sectioning, alleged sectioning that happened prior to this, yes, there's no evidence of that before me. There's mention of it, and it goes to the officer's state of mind. So, and that's all that in fairness, that's all that you argued, Mr. Gubitosi. But I guess what I was getting at is if there was anything at all that came close, that would have been it. But Mr. Gubitosi, I'll give you a few minutes for your rebuttal to the rebuttal.
I don't think I trust you to have sifted through what's relevant, what's not relevant. The evidence is what the evidence is. Closings are not evidence. I would suggest to you that, yes, I do need to be heard, that I argued the evidence that came from the witness stand and from the exhibits to Rubanasaro absolutely describe the ways that a firearm works and how a round gets into the chamber, and I limited my explanation of that to what he described and the like. I don't need to make a second closing. Thank you.
You just did that.
I did. I'm a lawyer.
Okay, now, I respect that, both sides. All right, so at this point, why don't we, I said that I was going to step off for the gathering of the evidence. Let me not do that. I'd like the council to just make sure that all the evidence, the exhibits are in order. You'll note your contentment on both sides. If you folks can take a look at the verdict form as well. I don't know if you already have. It's not complicated, but do you want, Mr. Bale, have you seen the verdict form?
No.
All right, so why don't you, officer, do you mind? Officer?
Commonwealth is consented to that.
Same.
All right, content with the verdict form, but we're still working on the exhibits.
Yeah,
right?
we'll take it.
Yeah, that's fine. I just was checking with our court officers about the availability of this courtroom this afternoon, so that we're checking on that.
ADA Gubitosi on behalf of the Commonwealth, does the Commonwealth content with the exhibits?
Yes.
Attorney Bradel on behalf of the defendant, is the defendant content with the exhibits?
Yes.
And that would be for both of you, exhibits number 1 through 98,
Right.
correct?
Plus the chalk, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, and the jury instruction. Yes.
Okay, not 98, I thought we had, weren't there 100 exhibits?
No, 90.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, okay. All right, so, and Mr. Wayne, I think it makes sense, as in a jury trial, for you to swear our court officers in.
you all raise your right hands? Do you solemnly swear that you will keep the court in some convenient place until he has agreed that you will not suffer any person to speak to him, nor speak to him yourselves, unless by order of the court, or to ask him if he has agreed? And when he has agreed, you will return him into court unless the court shall otherwise order, so help you God.
I do.
All right, we will stand in recess for my deliberation.
All rise, please.
All right, guys. Actually, that was very interesting. I enjoyed that discussion between the judge and the attorneys there, because these are interesting intellectual points of law, right? So I thought that was really interesting. It's unfortunate that the feed cut out for about a minute of it, and we lost kind of a key minute there. But I thought that was an interesting discussion. Again, this will probably not make me popular here, but I think Bradel did a reasonably good job in this case. Regardless of what he's done in other cases, he's done a reasonably good job here. So I think the camera's probably going to cut out soon because there's no way of knowing when the judge will reach a decision. But I would guess that that's more than likely tomorrow. So when the camera cuts out, I'll probably call it a day right there. But we'll keep monitoring this and go live as soon as there is a verdict. Do you guys have any thoughts? Did Bradel raise a reasonable objection when it came to the dog there? I think he did, but I don't think it really impacts the case. It might have impacted the case, though, if there was a jury. Iowa RRT says guilty. Are you actually in Iowa? That's pretty cool. We do have a lot of Indiana people that come in from time to time that are into true crime. Liz thinks that he will rule today. Yeah, I mean, he's probably already made up his mind. Tracy says guilty. See, I think she's factually guilty. I'm just not sure if it's beyond a reasonable doubt. JM thinks he might make a feeling today, might make a decision today. Yeah, absolutely, he might. Okay, so it's definitely over for the day unless they come back. And unlike with a regular jury, the judge is already committed to explaining his ruling. And so that's pretty interesting. So that'll become an issue that could come up if she's found guilty and they want to appeal. Guilty time served. Interesting. I don't know. That would be, I don't know. That seems like an awfully short amount for if you're guilty for assault with a dangerous weapon. Do I drink protein drinks? Not usually. Sometimes. I think if she's found guilty, she'll serve some time. Facing up to 5 years, right? That's my understanding, JM. Stephen Price says that he's watched 6 trials and has a 3-3 record. So what's your prediction here, Stephen? Your record hangs in the balance. Stephen Price says not guilty. So we'll see what happens to his 3-3 record. I predicted hung jury in both Karen Reed trials, and I was wrong on the second one, obviously. Melly Me says that she thinks he will come back guilty. So we're pretty divided here. So that's, I think most of us probably think that she likely is factually guilty, but whether that will be the ruling is different. Well, I think she chose Bradel because she knows that now comes with a mob of support. And that's something that she wanted. And it seemed to have had some effect in that we got that witness that came forward yesterday, the Karen Reed witness, who definitely would not have come forward if you didn't have the mob involved here. I don't think it was a very important witness because of it just being a judge trial. So Elevate says, thanks for your insight. Appreciate it. Appreciate it, Elevate. Any Red Sox fans here? Is anybody looking forward to opening day? Do the Red Sox, did their moves put them in a position to possibly compete for a World Series this year? If everything goes well, they have a very young team. So it's more based on upside. If a lot of those guys really if multiple guys on the team take that step to the next level, which they could, then they could be set up for success in the playoffs. JM is a Mets fan. I went to college in Worcester at Clark University in the 1980s. So there were a lot of Mets fans back then. A lot of New York and suburban New York people that went to Clark University. Barb is a Yankee fan here. And a Cubs fan. I've been to Wrigley for a game. Tom will be watching opening day at Kickback Jacks. What's that? How come you're forsaking tea time? Tom is a regular at a bar in where he's from in North Carolina, at a bar called Tea Time. But today they're going to Kickback Jacks. When I visited Tom, that's not a place he took me to, so I don't know of it. Right. So the key thing about the dog is what really matters is that Kelsey believed it. There was some kind of a box tick somewhere on that. And so really, if that's the case, the prosecution really didn't need to mention that. All right, guys. Let's call it a show for now. I'm going to leave the stream running for about 15 minutes just so that people in chat can continue to talk to each other. And as long as I'll be monitoring, and as long as I see conversation going on in chat, I'll keep it running so you can do that. And then when the conversation slows down to close to a standstill, I will end the show. But I'll be monitoring the court, and we'll come live as soon as there's a verdict. I have nothing in my schedule today or tomorrow that should prevent me from being able to go live. And any of you out there that happen to have my email or my text message, my phone number, please, in case I'm missing something like having lunch, send me an email or a text right away saying that there's a verdict. It's important to have that kind of group effort. All right. And good morning, Molly. Good to see you. All right. Thanks, guys. And we'll talk to you later.